in the Mayan calendar, the 21st of December, 2012, describes a constellation, the zenith, which only appears about every 26,000 years. From that, the Mayan calculations thereby conclude that, on December 21st, 2012, the Earth should lie on an imaginary line which joins the star which is above the left side of the constellation of Orion, with the central sun, respectively, the center of the Milky Way. The Sun encounters the Milky Way in a region which is formed by clouds of interstellar dust, and is called the Great Drift of the Milky Way by Earth humans. At the time of its setting, on the winter solstice on December 21st, 2012, the Sun appears directly in this rift, whereby it is positioned in such a way that the Milky Way, in all positions, right around, grasps the horizon. This thereby evokes the optical illusion that the Milky Way touches the Earth all around at all points, and the galaxy lies directly on the Earth. That is, on the whole, the end product of the recordings of the Mayan calendar. That should suffice, my friend. To say more would be too much of a good thing, as it would only promote the angst of the Earth humans, which, however, should not happen. Therefore remain silent about all the further explanations which we have given to you. Billy says, "Will do. But on the other hand, I still would like to say something regarding climate change, which also must certainly not be forgotten, which, however, will be deliberately disputed by the irresponsible scientists as well as by charitable organizations. This is because their palms are greased with amounts of money in the millions from big petroleum and tobacco companies as well as from notable multinational chemical companies and other companies, whereby false experts' reports are constructed by these purchasable experts, and they tell lies to the effect that there is no climatic warming and no catastrophe threatens. The criminal companies, which relate to this, gather behind them many of the scientists and organizations they have purchased and which are dependent on them, because they act on the premise that the population of the Earth, which is ignorant in the matters, and those scientists who point out climatic warming, would prefer to grant their belief to the lies of the purchasable scientists and organizations. It is therefore intended that the impression is thereby aroused that there is a very large number of good scientists and organizations which could prove that there is no climatic warming and, consequently, also no catastrophe is to be expected in relation to this. Truthfully, it does not only involve amounts of millions, rather high amounts in the billions, whereby the profit-greedy do not care if the world and the fundamentals of life for the entirety of humanity are destroyed. Everyone who is involved leads a conspiracy campaign through which the effective truth of climate change is disputed and thereby the enacting and implementing of worldwide, effective climate protection laws is meant to be prevented. Were such laws namely enacted and put into effect, then enormous amounts in the billions would be lost by the companies, and so forth, just as would the profitable sources of money dry up for their dependent scientists and organizations. So they are vehemently at work with the false expert reports, which are pregnant with lies, with which they make an effort to boycott the really serious results of research by honest and good scientists and revile them as constructions of fantasy. Thereby a delay of decades has resulted in relation to measures to protect the climate, whereby the companies, and so forth, which disputed climate change, have earned many billions. But the truth is that climate change is taking place, and, actually, not alone through circumstances which, since time immemorial, have been emerging in natural ways. Rather, more than 75% is taking place through human-evoked factors. And, ultimately, climate change will not only have effects on the earth and its waters and on nature, because it is already demonstrable that the glaciers and poles are also melting in a catastrophic manner and that the ocean currents are also changing, as a result of which new gravity waves, although slight to begin with, are already forming, and also rush out into outer space with very great speed. Therefore, the gravitational field of the Earth will also thereby change, not only through the threatening solar storms in the year 2012, which is, however, not only confined to the planet alone, rather it also has an effect out into outer space, that is to say, as an outer space gravitational tsunami. Climate change therefore does not change only the Earth, rather the effects are also carried into the solar system as far as the Kuiper belt, and perhaps still very much further out into outer space. Therefore, if the ocean currents are muddled up, then they create enormous quantities of energy through their gigantic masses of water, which influences the gravitational field. Additionally, as a result of climate change, the Earth's atmosphere also contracts and becomes more dense, which is already starting to happen unnoticeably. As a result of the entirety of the climate change which is already occurring, the inevitable first changes in the fauna and flora have also come about, which are unfortunately not yet recognized by the scientists, but from which, in the short or long term, visible consequences will emerge. It has already gone so far that the climate change is shifting gigantic masses of ice and water, whereby dangerous effects of pressure on the crust of the Earth occur, and tectonic displacements are evoked. That inevitably increasingly leads to severe earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, as is also the case as a result of big dams, which the narrow-minded scientists still, always, dispute, and, not seldom also because they do not want to admit the truth, or they are paid for their false calculations by billion-dollar companies. But what is not heeded with the necessary care is the fact that, as a result of the melting of the inland glaciers of all the countries as well as the melting of the glaciers of Greenland, the Antarctic and Arctic, the sea level is caused to rise and ultimately leads to catastrophic geological consequences. The gigantic ice expanses of Greenland, of both poles and of the inland glaciers of all countries, press, with many billions of tons of weight, on the lower stratum which is pressed deep into the crust of the Earth and in which powerful consolidation results. If the gigantic masses of ice now melt, then the pressure on the lower stratum diminishes. Consequently, this very quickly moves again towards the surface, and the reduction of tension thereby leads to the disappearance of the consolidation.